Big Value, Big Business Podcast, episode 19.
Hey, this is James. I wanted to jump right in here at the top of the show to tell you just how much I appreciate you and the time you take to listen to the podcast. You know, I know the greatest content in the world is absolutely useless unless it's actually seen and or heard by you, and I wanted you to know that I also know this show is nothing without you. Whether you listen right on the bigvaluebigbusiness.com site or you subscribe through iTunes, I promise to continue to provide you with the best content that I can. Again, let me say thank you for listening and thank you for your continued support of the Big Value, Big Business Podcast.
Welcome to the Big Value, Big Business Podcast with James Lynch, where we talk with today's most successful marketing minds about getting the right message in front of the right people and getting the right people to become your customers for life. And now, your host, James Lynch.
All right, welcome back, my friends, to yet another edition of the Big Value, Big Business Podcast. I am your host, James Lynch. I am really big time super excited about my very special guest today. Her name is Ann Handley. Ann is an evangelist on a mission to help us all to rethink the way we go to market with our businesses. Ann has been tapped by Forbes magazine as one of the most influential women in social media, and she is also recognized by Forbes Women as one of the top 20 woman bloggers, and is the chief content officer at MarketingProfs.com, where they offer real-world education for the modern marketer through training, best practices, research, and a ton of great content. And is also a monthly columnist for the Entrepreneur magazine and a member of the LinkedIn Influencer program, as well as, last but not least, the co-author of the best-selling book on content marketing, Content Rules. It's both a pleasure and a privilege to welcome Ann Handley to the Big Value, Big Business Podcast. Ann, how the heck are you today?
Wow, I'm great, James. How are you doing today?
I'm out of breath, but I will recover. I took a combination of the suggested bio from certain areas and tried to put a little spin on it, but so much for people that don't know you, which I don't think there are a whole lot of people that don't know you, but I wanted them to know all about you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Cool. And again, I thank you. And I just want to mention, I had a little inspiration for having you on the podcast because I saw something in your book, Content Rules, and among all the great advice in there, this spoke to me recently, and it answers the question, it's like, what to talk about when there's nothing to say. And you recommend, or your book recommends, interview luminaries. Conduct.
Yeah, and here I am. That's awesome.
I know. Conduct Q&A interviews with thought leaders, strategic partners, or flat out interesting creative thinkers. And this makes for compelling text, audio, and video content. Here you are.
All right. Well, good. I'm glad I was an inspiration to you, and I guess that's good for me too, right?
Absolutely. And thanks. I'm really excited to get a little bit about your journey in becoming a major thought leader, in the world of content marketing and helping folks just to really rethink and communicate their marketing message. So, let's go. Let's hear a little bit about Ann Handley and where you came from, but your humble beginnings, and get an idea of your journey that brought you here to where you are today.
Sure. You want me to start rambling?
Absolutely. Jack in the Box and all. Okay. Don't leave anything out.
Oh, wow. You did your research. Yeah, actually, that was my first job, working the window at Jack in the Box. It was that was indeed a humble beginning. But no, my professionally, my first job was working as a journalist. I come out of the journalism world. I was a stringer first for a B2B publication here in Boston called The Banker and Tradesmen, where I wrote about banking and real estate trends at a kind of very rudimentary level, since I didn't know a whole lot about either one of those, but I did come out of the journalism school, out of a journalism background, and so I always wanted to just write and create content for audiences, essentially. So from there, I went to the Boston Globe. I worked there for a long time. I've worked for a lot of other publications, both B2B and B2C. I wrote for the magazines that were in the back of airline pockets for a while. And then in 1997, I co-founded a website called ClickZ.com and suddenly found myself in the world of marketing, specifically marketing content. I was the president and the editor-in-chief there. Ultimately, became the chief content officer there. That was just my indoctrination into marketing, essentially. So I kind of came at it sideways. At first I came up through the publishing world, creating content that marketers would love. Later, I did it at MarketingProfs, and that led me into this whole content marketing space before it was really called content marketing.
Yeah, and it sure has evolved over the last couple of years, especially since your book came out. Was that around 2010?
Yeah, actually it was. It was late 2009, I think it was 2010, was when CC Chapman, my wonderful co-author, and I published that with Wiley. And it's become the best-selling book on content marketing. I still see a lot of people, reading it. At some point, we're probably going to have to update that because I know there's a couple things in there that are outdated. But, frankly, not a lot, because we wrote that book as an evergreen approach to how to create content that your audiences will love. And so some of the tools change, and those are, that's the part that needs updating it. But it's such a tiny part, I think, of ultimately what makes for good content, So it's a very fresh and relevant book, even if it was published in 2010.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I definitely wasn't dating it because it's not so much, we learned when we start out, if we start out the right way, it's not so much the technology, the techniques, the strategies. It's about getting down to the actual content and flushing it out, identifying our folks, and you know the drill.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, in the 4 years since Content Rules was published, I think that an overwhelming number of businesses have adopted that content-centric marketing mindset, and which is a great thing. But, a lot of businesses are still not on board. A lot of them are not doing content particularly well. So, as much as I think the world has evolved, in some ways, I think, content remains a challenge for a lot of companies.
It definitely does. And I'd like to go back to my roots in the big value content, educational, making our consumers just better, or our prospects and customers better consumers of our products and services.
Yeah. And I think, the biggest takeaway from my journalism background is something that I talk about on stage all the time, as relates now to marketing content, which is, create content that your customers will thank you for. Mm-hmm. What will your customers love? What can you help them with? How can you help explain the world a little better? How can you help enlighten them, shoulder their burdens? All that stuff. I think that's what journalists do, just by explaining the issues at hand. And I think if you can port some of that mentality, if you can create content your customers will thank you for, over into the world of marketing, then I think, just start there. That's just a really good place to start.
Yeah, I want to expand on that a little bit. I've heard you say before, we'll talk about the content equation, empathy times inspiration times utility. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So what you're referring to is something, again, that I talk about frequently, which is how I think about the equation that I think about for that'll produce the best content. And it's, empathy times inspiration times utility. So essentially, just to walk you through that. So empathy means, creating content that your customers will thank you for, with a real customer-centric mindset. I think a lot of marketers, a lot of companies say that they have a customer-centric mindset, but very often they don't. So I'm saying, create content that your customers need, that they want, that they will like, that they will thank you for. The second thing is inspiration, whether it's inspired by data, something about your customers, or whether it's creatively inspired or maybe a little of both. There always has to be some spark of inspiration behind the content they're creating. As I talk about frequently too, if you don't love what you're creating, if you don't think it's really awesome, then your customers won't either. So someone has to really care on the marketing side. The creator has to really care what they're putting out there, because I think it's palpable, from a reader's perspective, from a from an end user's perspective, from a customer's perspective. They always can tell whether you care or not. I mean, right? I'm sure you've had those experiences with.
Oh yeah.
Customers. Yeah, I mean, we all have. And the last thing is utility. Creating content that is very useful to your customers, that helps them do something, even if it's only to make a decision. My friend Jay Baer talks a lot about, has a book named Utility with a Y-O-U.
Yes.
And he talks a lot about, giving something, or giving your customers something that they can do, with their content. So that could be, some sort of app. It could be, anything. But at the same time, I also think it applies to ebooks or a simple blog post. A how-to blog post
Sure.
has utility. So being very clear that, you always want to be useful to the people you're trying to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. Actionable content.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. Talking about the difference between corporate marketing and journalistic communication. It's ironic. I work in an agency now as the full-time day job, but I see these walls that are just coming down as the teams join forces, social media with the copywriters, SEO team, and even my guys, the pay-per-click, the AdWords guys. They're all collaborating because now it's so important, and people are just realizing, even at the agency level, that it's about the customer and getting the message to the customer and what the customer needs to hear.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I also think, you mentioned publishing, and I think increasingly we are adopting a lot of those sort of rules of publishing, if you will, into our organizations. And, that makes me really happy, because I think it's really important to understand what the rules of journalism are as relates to content marketing. So things like, for example, rooting out opposing viewpoints, something that journalists are trained to do, that they do routinely, is something that I think is really valuable in content, but we don't necessarily do that.
Yes.
My friend Joe Chernoff has a great quote. He says, there's a name for something with a single point of view. It's called a press release. So I think, incorporating multiple perspectives, when an issue lends itself to that, I think it's a really, really powerful way to really get out of that corporate-centric point of view and into your customer-centric point of view.
Totally agree. And not only that, instead of releasing a press release, when you have alternative point of view in any piece of content, you're going to have different sides, and that opens the engagement, the communication, and you just start the whole thing going. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, another thing that I talk about frequently too is, create content that your customer will love before, or please your customer with your content before you please your CEO or your boss or your client. And I think that sounds kind of counterintuitive sometimes. Don't you want to make your boss or your client happy? Yes, but if your customer loves it, if your CEO loves it, then your customer might not. But the inverse is true, where if the customer loves it, and then your boss or CEO will by default love it. So I think it's really, again, another reason why it's really important to think first about your customer first. Have enormous empathy. Give your customers gifts, all the things that I think are really important to do when you're creating content for them.
Yeah, and I have to, don't hate on me. I'm going to go back to something else you said, but what would you write if the customer signed your check?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Some people in the audience, sometimes when I say that from stage, people in the audience will tweet and they'll say, well, that's already something that we do. They do literally. And it's like that. If that is your point of view, then that's awesome, because you're way ahead of where a lot of people are. So, but I think that is a hard thing for some marketers to understand, because, literally your boss signs your paycheck, not your customer.
Yeah, but who's signing his check? Who's putting into the bottom line there? Right,
exactly. And that's exactly the point right there.
Yeah, I love it. So let's shift gears just a little bit. Are you allowed to talk about your new book?
Oh, my new book, yeah. Well, we postponed this interview because I told you I was heads down in writing and I had to finish it.
Yes.
But one of the things I've realized, writing a book is like birthing a Volkswagen,
I'll pass.
Really, really hard, and it's not particularly pleasant. So So I am not done yet, but I'm getting closer, and I there's lots of momentum behind it. So I mean, I love writing. I am a writer by nature, I guess, and so I love this book. But at the same time, it's just a lot of work. So. And this is a busy season for conferences, so I'm not quite as far along as I'd like to be. But the book that I'm writing is called Everybody Writes. And essentially, it's the book that, the idea behind the book is that, there are a lot of books out there about writing, but there's not many books out there that are really written for a marketing audience. So it's part writing guide. It's part a manual on some of the ground rules for content, for good and reputable content in particular, like those journalism rules I was just telling about.
Mm-hmm.
And then part of it is just straight talk on some processes and habits to produce really great writing. I feel like that the conversation that's lost a little bit in this content marketing groundswell that we're all in the midst of is the fact that your words are your proxy. Your words matter. The words you use really are carrying your messages to the people you're trying to reach. And yes, you could say that in an age of video and podcasts like this one that, your words matter less. But, I bet, James, you're going to write a blog post that's going to introduce this podcast and share it with your listeners. You'll tweet it out on Twitter, as will I. We'll put it on Facebook, the whole thing. That's all words.
Absolutely.
And I want people to really be very intentional with the words that they're using. Maybe that's a little bit aspirational, but I think words have tremendous power, and I don't think that we are really recognizing that in as marketers, as people.
I love that, and because you come from such a strong journalistic background, and you'll be able to, we all know that marketers need this education, and you are the proof that you can be more successful when you embrace both the journalist and the marketing mindset. Yeah.
And also, not just the journalist mindset, but the writing mindset. I think a lot of people self-identify as that they're not writers. Well, I'm not a writer, I can't do that, but I think in this world of social media, in this world where everyone is a publisher, it also means that we are all writers. Mm. That's the other piece of it. So, I think that people are capable, whoever they are, capable of being a good writer. So if you self-identify as not being a writer or a terrible writer, or you were scarred in childhood by some teacher who told you that you couldn't write, I've heard a lot of those stories. Then I hope that, that this book will give you some kind of the necessary pep talk to make you a more valuable and ridiculously proud writer.
I love it. Ridiculously proud. I love it. When is the due date?
Well, I think we're targeting end of August at this point.
Beautiful.
But I'll have to let you know about that one because I'm a little bit behind.
That's okay. Speaking of being behind, tell us about what you've been doing. You've been traveling all over the world. You're speaking in all different conferences in all different countries. What's going on?
Yeah. I have been doing a fair amount of travel. This year I've been to... Gosh, was it this year or last year? It's so funny how things run together. Mm. No, this is only April. I've only been stateside this year so far. But last fall, I was in Istanbul for the second time, talking to a marketing audience there. I was in Croatia, which was an amazing place. I don't know if you've ever been.
I've not, no, but tell us.
Put that on your list. It's a tremendous place and really just a wonderful, one of the least unspoiled places I've ever been in terms of commercialism. So it was just a really amazing experience. I was in Denmark and outside of Copenhagen, which I met some really wonderful people there, became my really good friends, and so I'm hopefully going to go back there this fall. And then, locally, I just was at the Marketo event last week, which was really fantastic. Saw Hillary Clinton there. I was joking that I opened for Hillary, even though I spoke in a tiny room compared to her giant ballroom. I didn't get all 6,000 people in my audience, but that's okay. It was, technically the same audience. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that was fun. They put out a really great event. It was a really wonderful event.
Wow! So congratulations on your success. It's so deserved. You work so hard, and
Thanks.
Your reputation is just so out there, and I'm just honored to have you on the podcast. So tell me a little bit about yourself personally. Not to get too detailed, but rituals like productivity, accountability, you have it together, and with the traveling and the speaking and the writing, day to day, what keeps you moving towards your goals?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm a terrible procrastinator. A copy blogger ran a great Q&A with me, probably the favorite Q&A I've ever done, and they really got to some of these issues where I confessed I'm just a terrible procrastinator. It's just I will do anything aside from sitting down to do a really big project. Not necessarily writing, although a lot of times because I do so much writing. A lot of times it is a writing project, but I do things like change the oil in my car and decide I'm gonna make something really complicated for dinner. Descale the coffee maker. I mean, anything that'll just postpone the inevitable, sitting down and doing something that's really hard. But ultimately, as much as I procrastinate, my work ethic saves me, and that ultimately is what gets me to the finish line. So the only productivity hack I have is that when I'm having a really hard time starting a large project, I have my little dog here. She's actually looking at me right now, and I love her, and I take her out for a walk, and it really helps clear my head. And then I decide on my walk what my first line is that I'm going to write when I get home, and that's usually the thing that'll kickstart me into a project. But so yeah. So that's my only trick, which isn't even much of a trick. It's just a habit, I guess.
Well, that's a good habit to have. And you sound like you white knuckle it. You just kind of get down to it when you have to get down to it.
I do. It's
that's
like no
cool.
matter how much time I build into anything.
Yes.
And I don't know if you're like this too. But,
absolutely.
no matter how much time I do, I always white knuckle it. Always. I've got a couple of kids and I've got a family life and I work out of my house. And so it's, I'm also working around them and their schedules and the noise factor in the house and all that kind of stuff. So, the same stuff that anybody else deals with. But because MarketingProfs is a virtual company, I feel it a little bit more intently because, we don't have an office that I can escape to. I literally I'm talking to you right now from my kitchen. So.
Awesome. I love it. Well, that's the luxury of working virtually too. That's we can be creative, but we can get distracted.
Yes, it's so true.
Yeah, cool. Just to go down just a list that I like to ask the most successful people that I talk to, and you are one of those. Business resources. Do you belong to a mastermind or a podcast? Do you meet with anybody on a regular basis? Do you have any favorite books on the just to get you moving?
Yeah, that's really good. I don't. I look at all the marketing news. All the top vendors in our space are actually putting out some really good content. So anything related to marketing and content is something that I'm, constantly looking for. But I do a lot of, sort of listening on Twitter. I do a lot of kind of what I call social prospecting there. Where I'll find really interesting voices to listen to just by or read, whatever the case may be. Just to help, help inform my own, my own brain, basically. Just by stumbling across things on Twitter, just by seeing what people are talking about and who's saying something interesting on various subjects. So, social media, I get a lot of value out of social media. I don't understand it when my friends, typically those in the non-marketing space, will say to me, I don't really understand Twitter. What do you get out of it? And it's like, man, I get so much out of it. To me, it's not just a water cooler. It's a real learning tool. So I get a lot of value out of just, going to Twitter and seeing what people are talking about and not talking myself necessarily, but doing a lot of listening. Yeah,
I have to agree. Kicking and screaming. I just started when I started the podcast, building my Twitter presence, if you would.
Did you?
And it's awesome. There's so many people, and the people are so great. And I often I find myself kind of not trying to get out of the digital marketing space too sometimes, just to kind of see what everybody else is doing and to get. There's so much depth in out there in artists and musicians and. Yeah, it's a great place, and listening rather than speaking is so valuable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you just said, it's a real digital discovery channel for me.
Absolutely.
I get a lot out of just showing up there every day and I've been on Twitter for a long time now. I think 6.5 years, something like that,
Wow.
almost 7 years in August, I think. And I have a pretty large following on there. So sometimes, I don't. Sometimes I can just talk to the people who are, like you said, in my marketing world. But part of the reason why I started the Ann Handley Twitter feed, the Twitter account that I have separate from MarketingProfs, which is my main Twitter account, is just because I wanted a little bit more freedom to communicate and follow different kinds of people and just sort of feel what it was like to not be representing a brand on there.
Yes.
So it's been an interesting experiment, but I love Twitter, just, whether I'm on the MarketingProf side or on the Ann Handley side. And believe me, there's a Venn diagram, there's a lot of overlap between the two, but I get a lot of value out of it.
Cool, and it's good to know. I remember what I heard Seth Godin say one time. It was, once you get on Twitter in a business kind of way, especially somebody like you or him, it can get like a playing tennis with like 100 people, 100 or so people. So it gets so I could definitely see the listening portion rather than the putting out there, because you really could get hammered pretty good.
Yeah, no, you totally can. I mean, it's a challenge for me on the MarketingProfs side. I try to respond to anybody who is tweeting directly to me. But as Twitter gets more active, as the number of users on there grows, it's a challenge. Even though I think the Wall Street Journal came out with a stat the other day that said like 44% of Twitter accounts have never tweeted. And I thought, my God, I wish those people were in my list, because I feel like everybody's talking all the time. So. Are
you a fan of Twitter lists?
I don't use them. I mean, It's kind of funny, but I don't use scheduled tweets. I don't necessarily use lists. I mean, I've tried them all, and I just keep going back to the desktop. My approach to it is pretty straightforward, and it's incredibly. It's incredibly what's the word? It's pretty simple for me. When I'm on there, I'm responding, and when I'm not, if I'm not tweeting, I'm not there. So.
Cool. I like to use lists so I'm able to listen to particular people, and you can get lost. I don't like to miss the good people. So no, they're all good people, I have to say, but I digress. So, how about tell us what's going on? I mean, I can't wait for the book. Everybody writes. What else is happening? What's happening at MarketingProfs? And what are you guys? You're building out anything cool and interesting? We want to know what's going on.
Yeah, we have a couple of great programs coming up. We've really shifted from a straight publisher of marketing information to become more of an education and training company. And so we're putting a lot of resources and effort into our training programs right now. So on the retail side, so to speak, so training individual marketers, we've got a couple of really great programs going through our MarketingProfs University training. It's at MarketingProfsU.com. We're almost ready to launch our marketing writing boot camp, which is our biggest event, or our biggest boot camp, our biggest training program of the year. That kicks off in June. So we're really excited about that. It's going to be a really fantastic program. And by the way, this is in part why I feel like there's a real need for Everybody Writes, the book I'm working on, because Marketing Writing Bootcamp is, by far the biggest program that we run every year. So that tells me that there's a lot of people that are really interested in this whole topic. So that's a great thing that's coming up. We are gearing up already, believe it or not, for our B2B forum this fall in Boston. It's an annual event that we hold every year for B2B marketers. We'll have probably about 700 marketers at the Westin Copley this year. And it's a wonderful event. It's probably it's like my Christmas, in terms of the MarketingProfs year. It's the event that I most anticipate, and I most mourn when it goes past. So it's, if you're a B2B marketer, I would love to see you there.
Cool. Well, as we wind it on down, how can we find you? How can we get in touch with you?
So you can pretty much find me. You can Google me. I think I now own the first page of Google results, which I'm very happy about.
Awesome. Yes.
a state rep by the name of Ann Handley in Connecticut finally retired a couple of years ago. So I was like, thank God she can stop competing for my name on Google. She's in the news far less. But no, I'm kidding. You can find me at annhandley.com, which is my personal website where I write about marketing and writing and social media and sometimes just life. Or you can find me on either my MarketingProfs Twitter handle or on my Ann Handley Twitter handle.
Great. And I heard you're a big fan of Instagram as well.
Oh, yes. How could I forget that? Yes, actually, very, very true. I am a huge fan of Instagram. I love that platform so much, which is funny for me as a writer. I just never thought that I would connect with it, but it's a great platform for storytelling, and it's really opened my eyes to the power of the visual. So yes, I'm at Ann Handley on Instagram as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. And listen, I want to have you back when the book comes out so we can talk about it and get it out there, help you. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Ann. I appreciate it, and I want you to have a great rest of the day, and I will talk to you real soon.
Hey, James. Thanks so much. This was really, really fun.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. I hope you enjoyed our chat today with Ann Handley. Please visit Ann at MarketingProfs.com. You can find the show notes and the highlights of this interview at BigValueBigBusiness.com, episode 19. Or just go to BigValueBigBusiness.com and type Ann into the search box for easy access. Hey, and while you're on the site, I would be extremely honored if you would sign up to become part of the Big Value Big Business family. Yes, you. You will receive via email weekly updates and highlights on every new podcast episode I launch, and you can decide if you want to download each new episode and have a listen. Also, did you know when you sign up at the Big Value Big Business podcast, you will also get a really cool free gift. I have put together an awesome online business toolbox that has a ton of free internet tools and resources to help you build and grow your online business. So go on over to BigValueBigBusiness.com and sign up right at the top of the website. And also, did you know that you can listen to the show on iTunes? If you listen with your iPod or your iPhone, it would be awesome if you would subscribe to the show on iTunes. And as always, a review on iTunes would really, 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 really help us out to get the show in front of more people. So if you use iTunes, please subscribe. And lastly, as always, I really hope we've brought some big value into your day today. You take care, and I'll be talking to you real soon.
Thanks for listening to the Big Value Big Business Podcast at www.bigvaluebigbusiness.com.